Hey YouTube, show what program language you should learn first. My short answer would be pick either Python or JavaScript. And I'm going to talk about two particular languages and think first languages for yourself for a particular situation and preferences. So as you pick the first language for yourself, one thing to keep in mind is that once you know one language, whether it is C++, Java, or anything else, as long as you know one, it's going to be much easier to learn any additional languages because all programming languages are sort of related and similar. So I would say if you always start learning one language, if you're learning that, keep going with that. Other than that, there are 3 points you should consider as you pick the first language yourself. Number one, the job market. Actually, the job market is a tricky point to consider because it highly depends on your location and the industry you want to get into. For example, if you want to get into startup in San Francisco, good languages might be JavaScript or Python. If you're interested in going into gaming or banking, better option might be C# or C++. So I would say just take a look at the job postings of the kinds of job you're interested in. Websites like LinkedIn and Indeed.com. Just look at what their requirements are. Now the second point is to consider what you want to build. I'm just gonna give you a quick list here. If you want to build iOS app, so whether iPhone apps or iPad apps, I'd go with Swift. If you want to build Android apps, I'd go with Java first and maybe Kotlin. If you want to build websites, I'll start with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And if you're interested in data analysis, engineering, science, or machine learning, I'll start with Python or MATLAB. If you want to go with game development, it must be C# and C++. There are a lot of different options here. What do you want to build? And the third point is consider is ease of learning. I previous video I told you that Python is easy to learn than C++ or C, and JavaScript is easier to learn than Java. So what programming language should you learn first? It highly depends on your particular situation and your preferences. I would say in general, try to find something that fulfills all of these 3 criteria. So ideally, find something that's in demand in the job market. Let's do something very special, relatively easy to learn. And that actually brings us to Python and JavaScript. And that's because they are both relatively easy to learn and they both tend to be in demand in the job market as well. So which one of these programming languages should you learn first? That actually depends on what you want to build. So if you want more interested in the logic science of things and then visual, then I would say go with Python. Python is often used to build server-side code or backend code of websites, which is basically the code that runs on your servers. Many companies also use Python for data analysis, data science, and machine learning purposes. For example, when I was working in a big company, I used Python to visualize and analyze some data there. If you're interested in building websites instead, I'd first go with JavaScript. And if you go with JavaScript, first learn HTML and CSS. So the way it works is HTML and CSS determine what pages look like. And JavaScript to add functionality to those web pages. For example, you can add a piece of functionality that says, when I click this button right here, it's going to change the color in right here. And you can see all of that, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as a set of code that learns on your device, on your browser. That calls a front-end code. Front-end code alone is actually not enough to make a complete website. For example, something like Facebook. Because when I go to Facebook.com, Facebook needs to know who your friends are, and that is not stored on your device or in your browser. It's stored somewhere, Facebook server. So you need code that runs on Facebook server or your all website server. That's called backend code, which I mentioned earlier in the first videos. And to make backend code, developers use something else. For example, Node.js, which is based on JavaScript, or Django or Flask, which is something called web frameworks that are based on Python. So actually, to make a complete website, you need to learn a lot of things. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, as well as at least one web framework. I'd say just start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript if you're interested in building a website. If you're interested in learning Python, I recommend Python my Python tutorials in the coming days. And of course, you must learn about it when I am going to tell it. And you must be with me and subscribe my channel. I'm Javascript from Explain Technologies, a subsidiary of Wicked IT Solution. See you in the coming days.